Welcome, Katharine.
Thank you, honey.
So 10 years of rewriting fashion, that's what we're celebrating today and yesterday. I think we could safely say that Katharine Hamnett has been rewriting fashion for almost 40 years.
30, maybe.
30.
Yeah, but nobody's listened, so nobody's listening.
Yeah, we'll start right there. What was your eureka moment that began this massive lifelong commitment?
I think on the fashion industry, I was always kind of keen on putting over environmental messages and, social issues that needed addressing. But it was 1989 when, kind of checking that we're in line with the Buddhist principles of right livelihood, we initiated some research into the social and environmental impact of the clothing and textile industry, thinking we weren't going to find anything, we're just making silly frocks. Of course, we found a living nightmare. I was really, I said to the guy, like, okay, so is it all fine? He said, I'm really sorry, no. It's like you've been told you've got cancer or something. Hundreds of thousands of farmers working in conditions of worse than slavery, because slaves were fed, and when they were ill, they were given medical attention. These people were forced to buy the pesticides that killed them to be able to get a contract to sell their cotton at all, environmental degradation, desertification, long-term contamination of the aquifer with pesticides, pesticide runoff, fertilizer, herbicide runoff going into the sea, huge methane to greenhouse gas emissions from chemical fertilizers, molecule 200 times heavier than carbon dioxide, millions of garment workers working in conditions of, unsafe conditions of slavery, impact of nylon, tanning, polyester, fossil fuels, viscose, everything, just everything was wrong.
But you were a lonely voice at that point.
I think it was the only voice. Well, I was the first person in the clothing industry that had actually done that. There were Greenpeace had been talking about a lot of stuff, Pesticide Action Network. I'd been doing loads of stuff with farmers. In fact, they were one of the first places that we got our information from. But the fashion industry, was kind of cruising along in its kind of happy way. I was living the kind of art students, fashion design students' dream, concording around the place. Parties in Paris that people talked about for 15 years, being really naughty, but staying out of the papers. And so that all kind of came to a crashing end, really. And we started campaigning, I thought I'd just tell the industry that, this is going on. They say, gosh, that's frightful, let's change it at once. Wasn't like that. I had practically people I'd been buying hundreds of thousands of meters from, at trade fairs for jeans, like bull denim. I'm saying, have you got any organic cotton? And they just say, why should we make organic cotton when you're the only person asking for it? And one Italian manufacturer said to me, if you carry on with this ethical and environmental shit, you can take your collection and fuck off, which is quite strong. But so, I went from,
but that would
kind
just
of queen of the green to total pariah, in one.
The minute somebody says that to you, though, it just instantly makes you more convinced that you're doing the right thing. Who was the Italian manufacturer?
Who told me? Franco Penne from Gibo.
Oh, okay. It wasn't who I thought it was. All right.
Yeah.
But at that time, I remember that what you were doing it seemed to be very well received. It seemed to be acknowledged as something necessary. But
Well, clothing-wise, we were selling in 700 of the best shops in the world in 40 countries. We had a fabulous business. On top of the T-shirts. I'm only known for the T-shirts now because sort of fashion disappears without a trace. But we were being hugely successful.
And the success kind of
first one I lost was the denim manufacturer, because I said, look, we've got to be making organic denim. Denim was kind of thicker than that, inorganic. Right, we won't use it, but we'll put 10% of the profits to actually Pesticide Action Network, who are running a fabulous project in Senegal, helping farmers to convert to organic. So first season he paid up, second season he paid up, third season, it was too much money. I had to sneak in a Channel 4 TV crew in the limo, wave to the poor guy on security, I hope he didn't get executed afterwards, and just beard the guy in his den with a TV crew and say, give me the check now for the farmers, they need it. And it sort of, he wrote it, but of course that was the end of that relationship, and a kind of series of other relationships sort of disintegrated in its wake.
But getting back to the success, surely leading by example, with success as a carrot at the end of the stick, nobody else followed you then. You were a voice in the wilderness then.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've always been a Cassandra. Always speak the truth and nobody listens. I think it's my personal curse. Yeah, it was tough and we battled on, but then, nobody really, we were working in Japan and they were kind of very reluctant and people would be substituting stuff. And I walked out of another license because they'd substituted all the fabrics at the last minute from sustainable to non-sustainable. We had a vegetable tanned leather. They changed it. I was absolutely livid. I said, what the fuck are you doing? And they said, why are you complaining? The customers have reordered. I was just like, what can you say? But I think it's a battle worth fighting. I mean, my advice to anybody is don't do what I did because it was commercial suicide. I mean, the clever thing to do is to phase one out and phase the other in. No, I had to go, But to any brands that are, finally deciding they might convert to sustainable, this is the way forward. But you have to do it. You do actually have to phase the bad one out totally at the end of the day. You can't just carry on running the two parallel. Otherwise, you're just using sustainable as a marketing tool and you're still carrying on destroying the planet. So that's kind of slightly misses the point.
But that brings us right up to now then, that notion. But I'm curious about you as the Cassandra. Because we were talking about it a bit before, that would you describe yourself as a natural pessimist?
As a
natural pessimist?
Well, I suppose after 30 years I've got a lot of information. I've seen the slow progress that industry that the world has made. I've seen, discovered more and more horror stories about the impact of human behavior on many levels. And you just think, fuck, are we too late? But I was really inspired actually by the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez film that she's made on Democracy Now! With The Intercept, where she talks about the Green New Deal seen from a future perspective. It's like a science fiction film set in 2045 about how America pulled off the Green Deal. Initially, I thought she was talking about global Green New Deal. So when I realized it was America-centric, I was like, oh no, what about us? We want the Green New Deal too. I mean, that's actually what we do need, is we need a global Green New Deal. And we need a Green New Deal in the fashion industry. I mean, the thing, my hobby horse at the moment, you've got to let me put this in. I think I have the trick, and a lot of people are going to hate it, but a lot of people, I've kind of tested it through various organizations, and it's getting quite a lot of traction. And we basically, because it's all down to legislation, we have new legislation that only allows goods into our economic blocks, which are made to the same standards outside as are mandatory inside. That would mean everything in China, Cambodia, Vietnam, India, whatever, would have to be made in compliance with REACH. We'd have human rights, we'd have freedom of association, we'd have a realistic living wage, and that would immeasurably improve the lives of workers in the developing world. It would cut the amount of pollution that's been plastered all over the planet, because only outside Europe everything's not made in compliance with REACH. And it would level the playing field between domestically, I'm talking about made in the EU, or even made in the US goods. It would because it would make outsourced goods much more expensive. So it would stimulate manufacturing. It would bring back manufacturing into our economic blocks, which are being severely distressed by the deindustrialization that's happened due to China being allowed into the World Trade Organization without addressing its artificially deflated currency. So it would bring back jobs and it would cut carbon, because locally made is less carbon. And then we should be looking at how we deal with our carbon footprint. I mean, one of the things I was going to say, and I'd probably get thrown out for saying it, is that we actually shouldn't be here. This shouldn't be happening. These conferences should be happening as webinars. There's absolutely no reason, if you look at the meat of the conference, that it couldn't be something that we could be watching at home without traveling. I mean, I don't know how many people are here, but we should all be ashamed of our carbon footprint, I'm really sorry to say, and we shouldn't do this. The clothing industry is just profligate with trade fairs, fashion weeks. I know they're fun, I know we love it, it's the perks of our job, but sorry folks, we've got 1 million species about to die. You know, we've got life on Earth that's actually being threatened by human activity, and the clothing industry is the fourth, fifth, third largest industry in the world. It's one of the biggest polluters, and it employs 1 billion people. Like 1 in 6 of the world population works in the clothing industry. We have to get our shit together, personally. You know, we have to make a change, or there's going to be no world left. We're going to be like Mars.
Okay. Well, that does take me back.
I ran the idea past trade unions at a Fair Wear Foundation conference, which I shouldn't have been going to, of course, in Amsterdam. And the trade unions were yelling and cheering in the middle of the talk, which has never happened to me before. And I talked to John Mowbray from Eco Textile News, which is a very good magazine, which everybody should get. And he said the chemical companies would love it, because chemical companies in the EU are going bust because all the chemicals are coming in from China with falsified safety documents. So that would help to, you know, the clothing sector, with the trade unions, the chemical sector. So I think we should do it.
Yes. But what I want to know is, with that big picture, which is daunting and massive, and given your natural, I mean, you're a fighter, but you can see I think you see big pictures very, very clearly, and you can see the dark shadow at the edge of the big picture. How, if you're faced by these very daunting, massive, world-changing issues, how do you remain undaunted yourself? I mean, after years of being Cassandra, and we need more of them, how have you personally...
No, we don't need more Cassandras.
Well, I quite like
we need to believe everything I say, okay?
How do you stay... How do you yourself stay...
I think you've got to find...
so passionate.
I mean, I believe in people. I believe that fundamentally we're born good. I don't believe in original sin. I think it's an insult to God. If God's so perfect, how can he make something that's imperfect? So that's got rid of that. I think that we're born good. I think that we all want the same thing. We want to live in peace, live in safety. We want to be happy. We want to see a better future for our children. You know, we want to see everything, the world blossoming and blooming, and we want to know that there's a future. You know, and I think then the trick is, how do we achieve that? Well, you know, I think marches, demonstrations, petitions. Well, direct action, but modified. I mean, the Extinction Rebellion have been amazing, but they're exception to the rule. The peace movement, the environmental movement has largely failed because they've relied on, you know, direct action, schoolboy pranks, you know, marches, petitions, and T-shirts. And these don't actually change politicians' behavior. The only thing that changes politicians' behavior is something that threatens their ability to get re-elected. So we have to threaten like fuck. We have to get involved. We have to... I'm so glad you like it. This is a great audience. They're going to marry you. Especially the ones with European passports. Come and see me afterwards.
We talked about going down to your local MPs, when they have their
surgeries.
Surgeries.
Write to them and tell them, unless they represent your views, which are this, that, and the other, like my deal, you won't be voting for them next time. In England, we've got tracking devices. We can see how they vote in Parliament. I'm sure they have them in Europe. Apparently, they don't have it in Japan, because I checked, because it's like a very fresh, new democracy. But they can still be writing to their elected representatives and saying, we want this. Because this isn't democracy. We're halfway between a feudal system and democracy. The democracy nowadays, I don't think you even need to have elected representatives. I think the interesting one to look at is Switzerland, and it's been going since about 1860. And the country's run according to the results of various referendums.
On everything?
Yeah, pretty well everything. It's a percentage of the population signs a petition, and if it's sort of a minor issue, it's like 1%, and it goes up to, I think, 10% if it's a constitutional issue. They'll hold a referendum, but unlike the UK, they have 18 months' notice to have this referendum, and then it's a status issue with people informing them. People have to be informed. It's a status issue, and they talk about it in bars and cafes. Everybody does their homework. So by the time they get to the point of having the referendum, normal citizens are better informed than a lot of legislators, and the countries run according to the results. And in the cantons, which are like the regions, slightly autonomous, they'll have more. The ones with the most referenda are actually the happiest people.
But see, I'm a little concerned because the Brits aren't the Swiss, and I think that when we're talking about going to see MPs and their surgeries, I find the general caliber of politicians so
appalling. But that's why I'm saying we don't need them. If you can, I can transfer. I'm sure you all can. My bank, I'm so crap. I'm a dinosaur in the room. I can't do online banking. So I call up my bank, and they said, "Yes, madam, we recognise your voice, and it's you." And I say, "Oh, right, send 10 million quid to whatever." And they say, "Yes, madam. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" If we can transfer money by phone, we can fucking vote.
See, I am in favor of... Extinction Rebellion is new, and the impact they had with that one set of demonstrations of political action a few weeks ago was actually, I felt, new.
It's marvellous, and they had it in 33 countries.
And it felt new. It felt like this is direct action that actually is having an effect.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, we have them, but that doesn't mean to say you don't have to do my thing as well, Yeah, you can't be lazy about this. The future of life on Earth is at stake. If they
went to the MP surgeries, I just don't have any particular faith in politicians to...
No, it isn't, but it's just that, you literally, why do we have to have political parties? It would be much better to have, if we have to have an elected representative, they're represented for a constituency, and their job is to represent, they're a messenger of the views to the higher political field. Or maybe we just dispense with politicians altogether. We have referendum, we have civil service, which always runs the countries. All our countries are run by, the Ministry of Agriculture full of experts, rather than these twats who go from Ministry of Agriculture to nuclear weapons, and back again via housing, probably, and famine relief. They have absolutely no information, and they're useless. None. Get rid of them. Useless. Let's just have referenda. What about
What about, though, with direct action strikes? It's not so much they fear losing their seat in Parliament, but if we just strike fear into their hearts, just make them realize
we're paying them. Aren't they a waste of money? America, they spend, 8% of their GDP on education. And about 40% in the military. Couldn't we actually save the money that we're wasting on these politicians and put it into things that really need it? We've got huge insurrections over Europe due with, various austerity measures which are driving people to identify with, right-wing politics. We've got a huge amount to redress. We've got no money to waste on these people who are not doing their job. Get rid of them.
I agree, but so get rid of them through the normal electoral process. You're saying replace them through the normal electoral process. Vote.
Yeah, let's have petitions. Let's sign them, and vote. Yeah.
We put 1 million people on the street. You and I have been on marches where there were 1 million people on the street.
We're completely ignored. There was over 1 million people marching against Brexit the other day.
Yes.
And Donald Tusk said, British Remainers are EU citizens and they're being ignored. I appeal to the EU to intervene on our behalf because what's happening is extremely undemocratic and quite frightening. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the YouGov survey, there's a government survey that's done monthly on Brexit, and it's for 18 months it's been shifted into the Remain category. But it looks like we're being steamrolled by our crazy, useless politicians into the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, which is completely catastrophic. Brexit itself is self-harm, but a no-deal Brexit is complete suicide.
And there are 6 million people signed a petition for a second referendum.
Yeah,
and
we're being ignored.
And Parliament is supposed to debate any petition that has more than 100,000 signatures.
Yeah.
We had 6 million.
Yeah, exactly. And what did they
happened.
do? They just dismissed it.
So
it's
I
not
say
working.
direct action.
You say?
I say more direct action. Mobilize, impress on these.
No, but write to them, tell them you won't vote for them next time, scare the shit out of them.
Yes.
But literally say, I'm your constituent, I'm not voting you for next time, for instance, if you don't stand up and demand a second referendum, in Parliament. I mean, that's, I don't want to get too provincial and sort of Anglo-centric on this because you guys have come all over the world and you've got other problems, but it's slightly at the top of our minds.
I wanted to close on something which you clarified something for me yesterday when I was listening to Paul Polman talking about humankind. I know we have 1 minute left. I'll talk quickly. Humankind worships the invisible God while around us is nature visible, is God manifest in a way. And he was making this distinction about this peculiar quirk of human nature. It seems to me that we destroy nature in the service of the invisible God because the Bible tells us, well, most religious texts tell us that God gives us dominion over nature. You corrected me on that, and I thought that you corrected my misreading of the sacred texts. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to say what you think about
Okay,
that.
quickie then.
Quickly.
So it's 0 time. In the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about man is given the sort of Judaic script, so it's Jews and Christians, hello. Man was given dominion over the beasts of the field and the fish of the sea and the birds of the air. And I read a lot of environmental writers, and it kept on coming up that this is where people started making terrible mistakes. It justified everything that went wrong from about the time of St. Thomas Aquinas, I think, the 11th century. And I had a friend who's a classical scholar. He was translating Aeschylus because he was a poet as well until he was in his late 90s, just before, even when he was, as he was dying, he was still translating it. I said, check this for me, Paul. And he said, you're right. It's a mistranslation. It should mean partnership, guardianship, custodianship, control. We're supposed to, our job on earth is to look after it, to take care of everything, to take care of the planet, to take care of all living things and make them prosper. And that's what we've got wrong. And this dominion, you've got to get it out of your brains. It's a completely different job description. So I think we better get with the program.
See, you're an optimist. You are an optimist. Thank you, Katharine. Thank you very much.
Oh, look.
They love you. They really love you.
They're so lovely. I love you too.